I think my new neighbors are trying to eat me and I'm terrified. I feel sick to my stomach. I can't keep my food down. In fact, I never want to think about eating again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. The new neighbors moved into the house across the street from us just a few weeks ago. The place had only been on the market for a matter of days before the deal closed. At least, that's what I heard from the real estate agent, which isn't surprising given the housing shortage right now. That afternoon, I was in my office, which is on the second floor of our home, the window of which directly faces the street. A moving truck had parked there all day, though I found it a bit odd that all I'd seen thus far were movers. Every time I looked up, I expected to catch a glimpse of our elusive new neighbors, but alas, I was going to have to stay curious. My wife, Carmela, was the one who originally suggested we invite them over for dinner. I think it would be a really nice gesture, she said, while we were eating at the dinner table that night, just the two of us. As much as I like watching people through my office window, I'm not particularly crazy about interacting with them. Do we have to? We barely ever spoke to the Carmichaels, she reminded me. I'd love to actually get to know our neighbors this time. Sure, yeah, I said this so casually, shrugging my shoulders, as if agreeing wouldn't change my life. But if I could go back in time, I would have shut down the idea right then and there. The next morning when Carm left for work, she asked if I could take a break from my novel at some point and knock on the new neighbor's door to invite them to dinner like we'd discussed. Of course, I said. All day, I dreaded the task. It was actually giving me so much anxiety that I couldn't even get any work done. Finally, just after lunch, I decided to get the deed over with. I went outside, crossed the street, and walked up the steps of the front porch. The first thing that struck me as odd while I was standing there was the fact that all the curtains were drawn, despite the fact that it was daytime. The Carmichaels didn't even have curtains, I thought to myself. Did they just put those up? My heart began beating a little faster while I anticipated the awkward first meeting conversation. I told myself to just knock on the door, but that was easier said than done. I'll just tell Carm they didn't answer, I finally told myself. Because why not? It felt like a believable enough lie. The moment I stepped back down the porch is when I heard it. The front door creaking open. I stood there, frozen, now trying to think of how I was going to explain why I stood at their door for 30 seconds before walking away without even knocking. Can I help you? It was a woman's voice. She honestly sounded pretty nice, as well as confused, and I couldn't really blame her for that. I turned around and saw her narrow, pale face sticking out of the doorway. She seemed to be around my wife's age and wore her dirty blonde hair up in a bun. She seemed a bit sweaty, too, which made sense considering moving absolutely sucks. Oh, it took me another second to reply, but I finally managed to get some words out. I'm your neighbor from across the street. I was just walking over to say hi, but I, decided not to bother you while you're still getting situated. The woman smiled at me, showing teeth. You're no bother at all. I appreciate you saying hello. I'm Liz. I fudged a smile. Ryan. Also, my wife was wondering if you and, your partner would like to join us for dinner sometime. I was careful with my word choice because it had suddenly occurred to me mid-sentence that I didn't even know who lived in that house with her. You're so kind. My husband, Dennis, and I would absolutely love to come over, Liz said. How's Friday night? I couldn't tell her what I was really thinking, which was that Friday night, as well as any other night, were all no good for someone who doesn't like to socialize in general, but I simply smiled and said, we'll see you then. As I walked back across the street to my house, nerves finally under control after completing my one social task for the day, it dawned on me that I probably should have asked if Liz and her husband had any dietary preferences or restrictions. In retrospect, I'm so glad I didn't. All week, I dreaded the event. By the time Friday finally rolled around, I told myself that if I had a decent amount of wine with dinner, then perhaps I'd be slightly less miserable. I started drinking before they even got there. Anyway, dinner was actually nothing special. Liz and Carm seemed to get along pretty nicely, and Dennis was your average, boring husband who wore smudged glasses and probably worked in some boring office downtown. We made small talk, spoke of the weather, the stock market, recent movies, books, which I lied about finishing. After we finished our food, Liz offered to help Carm clear the dishes and prep dessert. I was silently screaming on the inside when they both walked out and left Dennis and me alone at the table. Time seemed to pass in slow motion. I mean, the guy just sat there, sipping his wine and staring at me. At the time, it felt like such a strikingly dull moment. That's because I didn't know Dennis was about to say something that would consume me for weeks to come. I wonder what you taste like. At first, I thought maybe I'd had too much to drink or that I'd misheard him. I chuckled nervously as I tried to comprehend the statement. What do you say? I asked. Dennis took another sip of his wine before answering. I think you heard me just fine, he said. Then, he put his glass down, licked his lips. What the fuck? I thought to myself. Is this guy messing with me? I had no idea what to say. You're not in particularly good shape, Dennis continued. Plenty of fat. Fat means flavor. I was horrified, waiting for the just kidding to drop, waiting for him to burst into laughter and say got you. But he never did. Instead, I watched as a single drop of saliva began to slide down from the side of his mouth. He's drooling, I realized. He's drooling because he's thinking about eating me. That's when the kitchen door swung back open and Carm and Liz came back in, carrying desserts for the four of us. Dennis nonchalantly brushed the drool from his face. I hope you're hungry, said Carm in a sing-song voice. Dennis just loves chocolate cake, Liz added. My heart wouldn't stop thumping. My mind wouldn't stop racing. There was simply nothing I could say. So I stayed quiet for the rest of the night, gently poking at my cake. By the time Liz and Dennis finally went back home, Carm was already on my case. Why'd you get so quiet? She asked. It was kind of rude, frankly. I was still too freaked out to defend myself. And honestly, I didn't even know how to begin to explain what had happened. Hey, Carm started. What's wrong? Are you okay? Obviously, I wasn't. Did something happen at dinner? I can't help if you don't talk to me. I swallowed, then finally told my wife the truth. Dennis, he said that. He wondered what I tasted like. What? Carm was confused, as was I. I don't know, I admitted. He was talking like he wanted to eat me. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew what Carm would say. And I was right. That's insane. She laughed. He was probably just joking. It really didn't seem like it. Our conversation escalated into a small fight, which was crazy because Carm and I almost never fought about anything. And here we were, debating about whether or not my neighbor implied he wanted to eat me. I don't like seeing you like this, she said. The next time I see one of them, I'll clear the air. I don't know if that's such a good idea, I said. I have to, Carm said. I don't want us to lose our new friends before we even get a chance to be, well, friends. As much as I didn't want her to bring it up to Liz and Dennis, I was also curious as to how they would do damage control. All right, I finally agreed. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I was standing near the front door, saying goodbye to Carm and rubbing sleep from my eyes. Have a good day at work, I mumbled. Hey, Liz is grabbing the paper, said Carm. Let's run over there really quick. Oh, I don't know. Carm was out the door before I could protest. I kicked my slippers on and went after her. The two of us intercepted Liz on her lawn just as she was making her way back to the house. Morning, Liz, Carm shouted, rushing across the street. Liz turned around, a sleepy smile on her face. Hi, Carm. Thanks again for inviting us over last night. Dennis and I just adored your cooking. Oh, it was no problem, huffed Carm. By now, I'd caught up to my wife and was standing just behind her, as if I was a little kid waiting for his parent to handle the confrontation so I didn't have to. Listen, Carm continued. I'm sorry to bring up such an awkward topic, but apparently Dennis made a joke to Ryan last night and it rubbed him the wrong way. Liz immediately looked apologetic. Oh my God, what did he say? Carm and Liz both stared at me, waiting for my answer. Well, he said, she's going to think I'm insane, I thought to myself. I'm going to sound like a crazy person. It seemed like he was implying that he wanted to eat me. Carm forced a laugh, apparently trying to lighten the mood. I know, it's ridiculous, said my wife. I told him that Dennis probably just has a dark sense of humor. He was kidding, right? Suddenly, Liz wasn't smiling anymore. She looked to Carm, dead in the face, then back to me. Actually, no, he wasn't. My heart was now beating out of my chest. Excuse me, said Carm. My wife seemed angry now. I don't find this funny, Liz. I'm quite serious. As am I, Liz insisted. And frankly, there's nothing funny about it. Dennis and I have discussed it at length and we've decided that we're going to eat the both of you. Ryan first, then you. And there's nothing much you can do about it. Carm and I stood there, speechless, as Liz calmly walked back into her house and shut the door. I couldn't believe what had just happened. And as messed up as it is, a small part of me was actually glad that this time, my wife wouldn't try to tell me I was crazy for what I'd heard. Once we snapped out of our terrified stupor, we both ran back across the street, as fast as we could, slammed the front door shut, and locked it. I could barely see straight. It felt like I was having a panic attack, only worse, because at least those passed, with time. I looked at Carm, trying to correct my vision. Everything was spinning. Finally, her face came into focus. There were tears in her eyes, and I could feel them in mine, too.